Yeah.
Okay, can I get a motion to reconvene us into open, please?
Oh, sorry, I have to bring up the right page.
Yeah, to reconvene us into open, the end closed.
Just waiting for a motion.
Well, I move we reconvene in open session.
Great, roll call vote. Susan?
Aye.
Rochelle?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Eric? Peter? Janice? Elizabeth, aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. We are back into open. All right, first item is the action regarding the closed session business as appropriate. Can I have a motion, please?
Move approval of employee separation agreement and release as presented.
I'll second that.
Great, roll call vote. Janice?
Aye.
Peter? Eric? Philip?
Aye.
Rochelle? Susan?
Aye.
Elizabeth, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right. Do we have any public appearances today, Tish? Okay. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for the consent agenda, please?
I move the consent agenda is presented.
Second that?
Any further discussion? Great. Is this one we don't have to vote on?
No, you can't have discussion. But you
Oh,
must
that's right. We
vote.
must vote.
Yeah.
Opposite. All those
Unless
in
we
favor?
pull it off, and then we all have to
Aye.
vote to
Any
pull it
opposed?
off.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. All right. Recognition information.
Okay.
What recognition?
Grove High School's graduation ceremony was held on June 2nd. Congratulations to the class of 2024. May your future be filled with success, happiness, and endless possibilities. Here's to all the amazing things that you will achieve. Many fun activities were held in our schools last week. Check out our district Facebook page for a look at just some of the events held in our schools to celebrate a very successful school year. And we would like to recognize tonight Joe Snyder, Activities Director and Associate Principal at Monona Grove High School, who has been awarded the Inside Out Leadership Award. Inside Out initiative, in partnership with the National Football League Foundation, empowers and equips school communities to implement purpose-based sports. Inside Out trains athletic directors and coaches to become transformational leaders, creating a community of belonging for student athletes' social, emotional, and character development. Joe has also been recognized by the National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association as a certified master athletic administrator. To earn this distinction, Joe has demonstrated exemplary knowledge, contributions, and ongoing professional development in the field of interscholastic athletic administration. The voluntary certification process included a thorough evaluation of the candidate's educational background, experience, NIAA leadership courses, and professional contributions. It culminates with a practical, written, or oral presentation project. So with that, we would like to recognize Joe on his achievements tonight, and Principal McGrath has
What's the box? Open it.
Well, that's fancy looking, look at that, and it's heavy.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it's congratulations, Joe. All right, we have another big recognition to have, which is that it is Dr. Olson's last board meeting with us today as he moves into retirement. So you get your prepared remarks, and now I get mine. Thanks to Katie for the both.
Okay.
But honestly, Dan, I don't know, it's bittersweet, right? Because you've done so much great work for the district, and it's been an honor to work with you. And on behalf of the board, we really want to say thank you for all you've done in terms of leadership for the district, as well as we hope the best for you as you move into retirement, that you get some fun and relaxation and maybe find some new passions. And I wanted to acknowledge a couple of things that have happened in your tenure that I think has made tremendous achievements on our school district. So we had a vision for academic excellence, obviously our equity work with which you steward amazingly, that has pulled our district forward has just been incredible. And we're certainly grateful for that. You have a deep commitment to student well-being and a focus on, building the capacity of your amazing leadership team that is all here too to support you. And it's fantastic and it's amazing to see. And it's not just the good stuff, it's also the hard stuff too, right? So budgets are always challenging and have gotten increasingly challenging in your tenure. Certainly, there has been COVID as a big thing with which you worked through. And regardless of any of those things that happened, I can say with certainty and in talking with other folks that your ability to take on those challenges, take them on head on, do them, and do the good work is fantastic. And our district will be better off because of the work that you did for it. And then I wanted to say, just on a personal note, and then I'll let the board, share what they want to. So I've been on the board for my 5th year now. And I have learned an incredible amount just from engaging with you, talking with you. And something that I've always really appreciated, Dan, is that I know that I can come and ask you stuff, sometimes the hard stuff, right? And you and I don't always agree. So let the record show, Dan and I don't always agree. But I always feel like you listen, you are open, you're responsive, and you'll come back with me with your own honesty, which I have greatly appreciated. And so personally, I am very grateful and consider myself a better professional and human having known you. So thank you for that. And before I conclude and we give him a full thank you, I want to know if anyone else from the board has anything they want to add. Yeah, Eric.
Well, thank you for saying that, Elizabeth, and I agree with a lot of what you said. And Dan, Dr. Olson, I want to tell you, as an educator for 20-some years, coming on the board in the teacher role and seeing how a board operates and learning a lot more about the superintendent position, the more time I spent on the board and working with you, the more I realized not only how incredibly difficult the position is, but also how well you do it. And I am not a fan of administrators in general. But when someone asks me outside, I feel confident I can say, well, I know what a good superintendent looks like and how a good superintendent runs a school. And we had one with you. So thank you so much. And just the things like the financial piece of not worrying about that on the board, your leadership, and being really reflective on making changes. So I really appreciate that. So, and I think I've become a better professional too, working with you. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, again, I think another piece of that, I agree completely on the financial and that we passed the referendums. And when you look at neighboring communities that haven't, and you're mildly surprised, how much work, and Katie, she's there, and the work that's done to do that and reaching out into the community. But one of the things that I think sometimes actually I know particularly Peter understands this very well, and Eric and Elizabeth and Rochelle, the policy piece. So one of the things we did was, first of all, you knew you could call Dan and talk to him if you had an issue, and that was really great, and that he would get back to you. It's a great supportive feeling for a board member. And then hopefully we didn't abuse that right then. But the other thing was the policies. So basically, we look at every single policy in this district, reviewed it, made a decision whether to move to the Neola policy or keep the old one, looked at every single one in depth, and then quarterly we get this packet of another 30 policies that have to be reviewed in depth, gone over, evaluated, looked at the impact. Just getting ready for policy meeting is 10, sometimes 40 hours. And Dan does all that for us. So that whole governance piece of what makes us do what we do well, you've been a major leader in that arena. And I, again, as a board member, I hugely appreciate it. And I hope the community understands the work and the leadership you've provided.
Thank you.
I don't know, you look like.
I just want to thank Dan. It's been a long time we've been working together. And when I remember hiring you. And we made the right choice. Of course, we never know, but we made a good choice. And it's worked out well. It took us a little while to get used to each other, didn't it? Each other's styles. But you've left the district better off when you found it, which is, the best praise I can give you. I've tried to get ahead of you at times and never been able to. So, so thanks for your time here. Thanks for all the hard work you've put in.
So with that, I am going to give you a standing ovation, Dan, and say thank you so much for all the amazing work you've done. Congratulations on your retirement. We wish you the best. All right, and now that you and I are both equally uncomfortable, we will move on to administrative reports.
Okay, well, tonight I have one topic to report on, and it's just a follow-up. You might recall back in January, the board had a discussion item about transportation, and we had, discussed a little bit about, particularly since we've opened, Granite Ridge, and the last time the board looked at this with regard to who was eligible for transportation and not, was back a couple of years ago. And so with that, just an update, on that. So on there's a lot of information, links to current maps, and a link to the document that you approved back in 2021 with the unusually hazardous areas. And so you'll see that our current maps do still mirror that report that was approved by the board. And just wanted to, again, clarify for everyone how this works. State law, state statutes are actually very basic, right? That we must transport all students that are within 2 miles of the schools. Most districts have that a shorter distance than that. And our policy mirrors the statutes, but then the big part is it safe for students to walk to school? And so the document that you approved back in 2021, we did hire an outside consultant that basically scored, or did a rating system for different neighborhoods and so on. The threshold that you chose as a board is a pretty high threshold, meaning that we transport probably more students than many other districts would in similar circumstances. And certainly something that I appreciate, right, about this board, that you're looking for the well-being of our students. And so that's kind of the summary of how that works. The other piece that has come up with questions about, well, what if someone who is not eligible for transportation thinks they should be, that maybe they do live in an area that would meet that standard of unusually hazard. So they may make that request and we would review it. The statutes actually say that the sheriff's department should be consulted in that. They used to, in Dane County, do even more than that. They would help us even develop our guidelines. They don't do that any longer. That's why we hired the outside consultant. But it is in statutes that they do have a role if they're ever an appeal, so to speak, or contested, with that. So I did put a link. I just added this afternoon, the DPI website that has all that information. So that's kind of an overview, but I know there might be some more specific questions, so I'll pause and be glad to talk about what you'd like.
Great. Eric?
So I requested this because I had some constituents come to me who live on over on Parkway Drive, and there is some houses over on Winnequa and Parkway Drive where it's about a 1.1 mile walk to the school. And there's a couple ways to walk to the school, but one of the main ones is down Winnequa Road there. There's no sidewalks there. So I walked it and I also drove it. And it is kind of a little sketchy in the morning for a third grader to walk from that area to the school. So that was the concern that came up. And I kind of agree with that being, it could be a safety concern. So I guess my question then is, now we have an independent consultant that determines that, and then it can be request to be reviewed by the sheriff's department?
Yeah, and actually, the first thing we would do is review it ourselves administratively.
Review it
Yeah.
ourselves.
So someone, Mark or someone on his
Yeah.
team would actually go out and look at it.
Okay.
And if they agreed with your assessment that, yeah, maybe this is unsafe, we just do it. We make the change ourselves.
Is there a process that someone would have to go through? Could they email, could you please review this?
Yes.
Would that be
Yeah.
enough? And
Yeah.
that would be sent to you and the board then?
Directly to me, probably, Mark is the one that would look at it.
Those requests all the time.
Okay.
Not all the time, but we do get those requests, Eric, and I went out, or Laura, who's my assistant, go out and review them. And so if we determine that, and we, like what's the island over there?
Yeah.
We made the determination, I'm like, yeah, we probably should change
Yeah.
things. So it's a matter of just going out and,
Okay.
as Dan said, reviewing it.
Great, so that's what I'll do then.
Yeah.
I'll have them email you, even though you're leaving.
Yep, and I'll make sure it gets
I'll
in the
make sure
right
it goes-
hands.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
And some of the issues are, yeah, it's fine, maybe in September,
yeah.
but December,
Winter, yeah.
there might be some issues. So that's, you take all that into consideration.
Okay, perfect.
And the age of the kids and all that.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions and I think my concerns.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Peter?
And I think we need to continue to emphasize and work with the municipalities about the importance of safe pedestrian and bicycle accessible streets. I think it's good for kids to walk, and it's good for a lot of reasons. Saves us money too, with this only one factor. We went to 2 miles because it's the maximum walk zones for back when 2011, 2010, because of the financial issues. But we do need to continue to emphasize and work with the municipalities. For example, on the southern end of Winnequa Road, in Monona, they put in sidewalks, and they've been a huge success. We see a lot of people walking and biking, and they made it safer for bicyclists and so on. And it's been a huge success. So we need to just continue to work with the municipalities on emphasizing the importance of this.
Yeah, Philip.
Yeah, that was similar to a question I had, which was how do we work with municipalities? I was reading through some of the recommendations in this report from 2021, and I know some of the areas of Monona I'm familiar with, none of these were implemented, and so I'm just curious, how does that process work when we do a study like this and it says, hey, it'd be a lot safer for kids on this particular street if you posted a 20-mile-per-hour school zone speed limit or striped the side of the street as a walk zone? How do we move that recommendation out of the city and stress the importance of it?
Yeah, I would say it's an informal process. So I think when we have something like that we think is worthy of consideration, then it either be Mark or myself reaching out to the officials from the village or the city and just starting with that conversation about is there even a chance that they would look to get up for consideration or discussion and review. Probably the thing that we've had the most conversations with over the years is crossing guards. Now, the crossing guards actually are employed by the city and the village, but we work collaboratively with them about where we think the safe areas are. And there's been a challenge at times, particularly in Cottage Grove, to find enough people to fill those positions. And so then what are the highest priority that we need to have those crossing guards? So, for example, next to the four-way intersection near Cottage Grove School, if you're on the north side of Cottage Grove Road, you do get transportation even though you're really close. And we do have crossing guards, but it's one of those that we've decided that, it's still a major highway. And so we do offer even though a lot of kids do walk and it's safe because of the crossing guards, we do offer the transportation. So yeah, it's just more of an informal process.
Thanks.
Yeah, Peter.
Yes, I mean, that's a very good suggestion. I would suggest that we forward this to the city councils and city and town, whatever, the appropriate bodies, and ask them if they want to have a discussion about this at one of their meetings. I'd be happy to participate if,
So would I.
takes. But I think you should forward to them at the very least and ask them if they want to have a conversation about it, just so that they're aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that suggestion.
I always tell people, and there's this thing, Monona doesn't have safe sidewalk, doesn't have sidewalks and so on. There's a cost to that, in that we have to bus kids that we wouldn't otherwise bus, short distances, because it's not safe for them to cross the streets and so on.
Yeah, we have similar issues in Cottage Grove.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah, exactly.
Any
Look
other-
at the walk zone around Taylor Prairie. It's only kids who can't cross the street.
Basically. Any other questions or comments for Dan? Awesome. And actually, we have to go back an agenda item. I apologize, Janice. I totally skipped over correspondence and announcements, which is you. You have an announcement.
So on Friday, June 28th, the Cottage Grove Library Board and the Glacial Drumlin Gender and Sexualities Alliance, the GSA, are partnering to host Cottage Grove's first Pride Parade. I'm modeling the GSA shirt that they just had made for Pride Month. So it's going to be from 2 to 3 p.m. And the students designed this shirt, which is really cool. It's going to be from 2 to 3 p.m. at Granite Ridge School. There's going to be a very short parade from the parking lot into the gym, and then there's going to be things like games and face painting. And we were promised lots of rainbows. So please come if you are able.
Thank you, Janice. And apologies for skipping that part before I move down. All right, we will move on to board reports. First up, Philip with personnel. Yes.
So, Dan, in terms of the transportation issues, is there a way, again, we're getting this and school is out now. Is there a way to communicate this to the families so that, particularly, so they could see if there's a change and where there's a change? What's your
So,
thought
yep,
about
a
that?
communication went out to families a few weeks ago with links to all the maps and so on. And the changes were very, very minimal. And so those families are aware. The biggest change probably we actually made during this school year is the newest apartments that opened in Cottage Grove. When we did this plan, some of those apartments weren't open. And so they initially were part of the what we call the walk zone. They were not eligible for transportation. And we determined that they were just under the threshold at like 1.9 miles to get to GDS. And it was kind of the easy decision that they should be. So Mark worked with his team and made that change. And so that's the only, significant change on the map from a year ago. But I said that change actually happened during the school year. There's no changes at all to Winnequa or the other schools, but the information about in these maps has been shared with parents already.
To go out in the transportation survey that goes?
Yeah, so we do every year, parents, because we have so many, we do need them to request transportation if they're eligible. And so the other thing we did change is we did update the maps as far as them being clearer maps. The ones that we had that were approved as part of the study in 21, we actually sent those, Vanderwall and Associates who do our enrollment, they all do urban planning and so on. They have, nice maps. And so they've updated our maps to make it clearer and easier to read as well.
Great, thank you. All right, Philip, personnel.
Yeah, so brief update on Personnel Committee actions over the last couple meetings. We've had initial exchanges with the MGEA on bargaining. The committee's basically been pending the budget, which I believe we're getting tonight, or the initial budget, right? And so following that, we're going to be meeting some more to, now that we have numbers, to fine tune what we're going to offer. As far as the most recent meeting on 6/4, we had a good meeting with the MGEA and a number of staff members to discuss some handbook requests and change requests to the handbook. Had an opportunity to hear from many people, and I think it was a good, productive meeting. We're going to meet again as a committee on Monday, the 17th, and we'll be making recommendations to the board in July based on that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Philip? Okay. Next up is ad hoc 4K2 attendance boundaries. And so we have had 2 meetings since we last spoke on May 20th and June 3rd. I am really excited to announce that we came to consensus around boundaries that we are going to be proposing to the board. We have one more meeting that'll be scheduled. So let me talk process first, and then I can kind of talk where we landed. First of all, and I think I shared this last time, the committee has been excellent. We've got families and community members, staff, board members, obviously, a lot of high engagement, a lot of really great discussion around what matters most to our district in terms of student experience and staff experience and neighborhood experience and all of those pieces. We will meet one more time, likely in August, around the beginning of this, kind of the beginnings of the school year, at least for staff, to reconfirm our initial consensus and then finalize our report, which we'll present to the board likely in the September meeting for a vote. Looking at a variety of factors, where we landed was using the main arteries of Cottage Grove as the boundary line. So that would be BB and N. It worked well in terms of ensuring equity between the 2 buildings. It doesn't break up any neighborhoods, which was really important for us to not just like have a random line here. It doesn't cut out some neighborhood down here, so they have to wave by Cottage Grove School, for example, on their way to Taylor Prairie. So lots of things went into that. But at the end of the day, that is where our committee currently stands. And so nothing to happen in the next couple of months, but you will have a report in front of you likely in September. Any questions at all? Great. All right, last up, Susan, MGEF.
The Monona Grove Education Foundation met on Tuesday, June 11th at 4 p.m. Lorene Gage and Jared Rosing attended as potential board members. There are currently 3 open board seats. And Kathy Klinke will be leaving the board. Dan Olson provided the superintendent's report and was honored by the board for his years in the district. Dan reported that he met with the Cottage Grove PTO as they are working on a structure to represent all schools that will build resources and support families and staff. He reaffirmed that all schools except Granite Ridge have individual school endowments of a minimum of $10,000. It's my impression MG 21 also does not have that endowment, okay? Jason distributed a handful of thank yous from scholarship recipients. There were 21 scholarships awarded at senior recognition from the foundation. And the MGEF is going to be working with MG21 on creating a 501c3 pass-through. So if they are building funds to support outside of the school district funding, they could use that as a tax-deductible pass-through. New business, they discussed a timeline for their CARES campaign, including doing their sponsor letters, setting goal and sponsorships. They're doing a chamber luncheon with the Cottage Grove Chamber on September 26th. Oh, this was really a neat thing, so I want to make sure I mention this. So one of the things that the foundation did do was they went to all the schools, collected old winter gear that was in lost and found that nobody would claim, nobody wanted. They ended up with 2 carloads of winter gear. It's all being cleaned, and once it's cleaned, and Klinke's is assisting with that, it will be redistributed in the schools for student use. And many scholarships were distributed at senior recognition. In terms of grants, approximately 8 grants were approved totaling $6,100 since the last meeting. Communication is working on a website and a recognition process for teams and organizations participating in the homecoming parade, which is mildly interesting. And they're cleaning up the snack packing for the year. They had already updated the scholarship committee report, and the investment committee is working on CDs. And again, it's a great support process for the students and their families, and I think we are ever grateful that they're working hand in hand with the district and that we provide support for that foundation. So thanks to all who are a piece of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, moving on to possible action items. The first up is the 2024 to 2027 School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding.
Okay, we do have some guests with us this evening, and so if you wouldn't mind joining us at the presentation table, and so that as we present the MOU, so what we have is the 3-year agreement. It expires at the end of this year. There's a couple minor changes that we have reviewed, and we can speak to those. But I thought before you approve it, as an opportunity for you to meet the chiefs again and one of our SROs, and if you have any questions or anything they'd like to share as well about the program. So if you guys don't mind introducing yourselves, and then we'll go from there.
Good evening. This is the first time I'm getting to meet this full board. My name is Mark Gary, Chief of Cottage Grove Police Department. Pleasure to see you and meet with you.
I have met probably all of you. I'm Jessica Helgeland. I am the former school resource officer for the Cottage Grove schools. I was just promoted to sergeant in March, so I'm out of the schools and back out on the street.
Congratulations on your promotion.
You promote yourselves out of this role. I'm Brian Cheney, my 3rd year as police chief for the city of Monona. I haven't had the chance to meet a couple of you, but good seeing all of your faces. And Luke Wunsch, who I gave the night off, is the SRO representative for Monona.
Well, welcome.
So I'll just kick it off. We had an opportunity to meet recently, and we check in, fairly, regularly, but to talk specifically about the program that we the recommendation to, renew the MOU with each community. And talked a little bit about the changes. And so the changes, just to summarize, they're pretty clear. Our policy committee actually was looking at developing an SRO policy. There is a template that Neola uses, and it just clarifies a little bit about the role. So for the most part, everything that's in that policy are things that we're already doing. And so I wanted to make sure we share, with the chiefs that they would be comfortable if we made these adjustments. And so there's a couple of minor adjustments in the MOU that essentially are using that language from the policy, which is coming later in the meeting as a first reading, so that's really the only change in the MOU. I think we did a really nice job with it 3 years ago, completely rewriting it and underlying, expectations and roles and responsibilities for the program. I can just say as a summary, I'm just thrilled with the work that our SROs have done and our administrators as well, and working with them, really about clearly defining those roles and ultimately it's about our students, right? And providing, the word resource is so important, providing that resource for their students and their families, I think just as importantly. So, so with that, leave it to you if you have any questions or if our guests would like to.
Yeah, I would love, before we open up for questions, to hear from you all about just kind of how you're feeling about how the SRO program is going and what is working well with it and what opportunities do you see in this next MOU cycle?
So I'm the new face. Obviously, I came in midway through the original MOU. Came from a district that had a school resource officer, and actually on my departure, they were just implementing a second one for the district. It's the collaboration, it's the partnership. It's truly working with not just the students, but the parents, the faculty, to help truly bridge some of those gaps that have existed in the past. This coming into this district has been refreshing. We have great partnerships, truly being split communities, but also with the students and being able to help them as they're transitioning, going from one community to another in the school process. I'm not going to speak all for the sergeant here because she's been there for 7 years. She's seen that transition from the elementary schools all the way to the high school and had that rapport. And the next SRO that Cottage Grove is bringing in, that'll start in August for the next school year, is going to develop those same partnerships and collaborations, and he's looking forward to it. And he'll also bring a little cultural diversity to it. He's Hmong, so he's going to bring in that whole component. That was one of his biggest reasons to get in law enforcement, was his original experience as a young child with his SRO in his school district. So we look forward to him bringing that to Cottage Grove and to Monona. Jess, anything?
I just want to say, the last 7 years being your school resource officer, one of them have been the best of my career. I've been in law enforcement for 19 years. It was really the one position where I felt like I was doing something proactive, able to stop things with students before it got to a point where I had to be reactive. I made a lot of great relationships with students throughout the years. I still see students who have graduated and they'll see me out and about and they remember who I am and they come up to me, and I feel like it's a very important position. I might be a little biased because I was, but I never had a school resource officer growing up. But I do see the importance of it, the relationships that kids are bonding with, their school resource officer, and just having that extra person there that cares about them and helps them out. I can think of handfuls of students that will come to me before somebody else because they feel safe with me. I loved it. I'll never forget it. I'll miss it, but I'm excited for this next chapter.
Well, from my perspective, I think some of you remember having very candid discussions with me about some of the needed changes. I think we came to a consensus that we both agreed that there was probably some missteps between this group and then us as a police department, and we acknowledged that, right? And we looked at ways to really improve that program, because we say it over and over again, Jess and others and Luke are a tremendous resource. And I if you check YouTube and you look at some of the city council meetings at Monona, you might hear me say, you couldn't pay me enough to do that job. But there are wonderful people like Jess, like Luke, and others in both of our departments who are perfect for that position as well, right? So just because I'm not the most qualified for that job, we do have people who are extraordinary role models and extraordinary officers, and I think are a great resource for this community, the school community. And we've tweaked some things at our level, particularly with administration, and Mitch has been great, Principal McGrath, sorry, has been great to work with, and all of school admin at Winnequa included. We just changed our approach, rightfully so. And we lifted what was, frankly, a more punitive model and turned it into more resource supportive model. And I mean, I'm looking at pie charts and graphs now that prove that our contacts, the vast majority, 90 percentile of our contacts are student-initiated contacts, in which students are reaching out to our school resource officer, asking for advice, or reporting incidents that happen at home that we need to address or report. And so, you know, and we talk about this monthly. I do monthly reports at our city-county meeting. I'm from Madison. At our city council meeting. And oftentimes we talk about the work that the SROs do in our schools, or some of our alderpersons hear about some of the activity in the schools. And there are some questions as well about certain activity that happens, and I'm happy to answer any and all of those if I can. And one of the things that's often highlighted, and I think it's important to discuss, and I would ask that this board consider in their deliberations on pursuing this MOU or not, is all of the work that the officer does to connect the school and the student or the parent or the teacher with other resources. That, I'll be frank, I'm not sure you'll have that where if it just was a call off the street patrol officer who just got done with our Walmart call, right? And there's 2 Beltline crashes holding, and you got the chief waiting for him or her to clear to give an assignment. Your SRO is deeply invested in your schools, in our schools, right? In our students, and our parents, and our faculty. And I think that is very critical in having that resource there, because we're able to use and rely on those relationships to keep our community safe, to keep you all safe, kids safe, and to foster an environment where help the mission of all of you and all of our educators into making sure kids are a success, right? And when Luke goes in there and does stuff that I couldn't do because he couldn't pay me enough, he does it well. And whomever is after him, because he might promote himself out of it too, will do a fabulous job as well. So I presented this as it stands, the MOU, to our city council. We have 2 reads as far as our process goes in Monona. And I was met with a lot of sort of good pointers, right? And I have an open door policy, as many of you know. Nobody came to my door. That's not to say there won't be questions next week, right? But they're not shy. And so typically, I would hear of any overarching concerns. And I think I'm not hearing that because we've talked a lot throughout the 3 years. And they've checked in on me to see how things are going. And they have kids in the school, right? So I talk a lot, so I'll stop. And I think the chief, I, and Jess, we're just happy to answer any questions you might have, specific questions.
Yeah, thank you. Opening up the floor for questions. Eric.
Chief Cheney, thank you for that information. I've been somewhat critical in the past MOU, and I know I've spoken with you before, and I just want to commend you on that statistic that you said 90% are student-initiated contacts. That's exactly the type of thing I was hoping that you would focus on and concentrate on. And I can't stress enough how important that statistic is. And I hope that you continue to try to improve that, because my concern is always, if students are in the schools, that is a safe place, that is a place where we want them to be. We don't want to take them out of the schools, whether it's for drugs or whatever. That's the last thing we want to do as educators. So I really appreciate I'm a supporter of this MOU now, as I don't think I was before, and that's a big reason. So I really appreciate the work that you've put into that, and I hope that you continue to do that. I'm not in Cottage Grove, but I hope you also realize the importance of that student-initiated contact. I can't stress enough how impressed I am and happy to hear that. So thank you.
I don't have a percentage for you, but I can tell you that it is the majority.
It
Jess
is
can attest to
definitely the
that.
majority. All of my logs say student initiated, student initiated.
Susan.
The other thing that I think is important that we understand, because it's recent, and I think for those of us who were watching the news, were hugely impacted by the event in Mount Horeb. And so one of the first things I did was talk to the chief about that. First of all, we have a Monona Grove teacher who is their director of business services now. And he had actually talked to me about, at the WSB meeting, about the SRO and the importance of the SRO. And I said, oh, we've been very supportive of that. And Scott was saying, it's really an important role. And so I saw the chief right after that happened. Would you just add a couple lines about how important that role was in that particular incident?
Going over step here, except to say that the SRO was involved in that incident. I think I'm comfortable in saying that at least. And I think timing was important. I think that as somebody who's trained and works with children on a daily basis and who you all help train is important to have that resource there. But also that connection with sort of after action, after the incident and the reunification process, which I think, we will learn from too, because there's some lessons learned from that. And my reaction to that, as in any significant case, and obviously we'll let the chief opine here from his perspective, but is to show support for our community. And that's what Luke did. Our officers had squad cars at all of, including our private schools and charter school in town. And we reached out to school administration and asked, is there anything we can do? Because we know and can imagine how scary this must be. And we will want to do everything we can so that students can continue to learn and be successful. And we can support your role and your mission. But I'm a little biased too, because I'm a cop, been a cop for 24 or 5 years. I think it's important to have that resource around our most precious commodity, and that's our kids. And however you want to dress that person up in uniform, I like wearing a uniform. Mark is out of uniform today, but he usually does.
Usually I am.
Or in soft clothes that Luke prefer, and Jess, you do too, that prefers, which I think is a more approachable, attire. At least you have that trained resource that's there, ready, available, knows the school inside and out, can communicate directly with the police officers who may or may not have to respond to the school. That's important, Susan, and all of you. I think that, we have to, and I appreciate you acknowledging Mount Horeb. I wasn't sure if that was going to be brought up, but it's something that it hits close to home, but we've been paying attention, as all of you, I'm sure, to events that have happened all throughout this country, right? And so I'll just end by saying that the SRO, once again, was critical in that incident and in the healing process as well. Mark, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it all.
Janice.
First of all, I got the pleasure of working with Officer Jess, and I can tell you how many times kids would just go to her office. So as far as students contacting the SRO, I saw that in action, and I'm sad that we'll be losing you, but congratulations on your new job.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks for coming here to follow up on what Eric said. The new MAU requires has an annual report, and we haven't seen anything like that. But you're talking about data already, and I would wondering if we can maybe get something this summer if you guys are ready to talk about that. So, because I'd like to see data and have a baseline as soon as we can. We've had the SRO program for a while, so I'm sure you've got some data. So if you guys, if it's not too big an issue to put that together, I'd love to see it this summer if that'd be a problem.
I report out monthly to our law enforcement committee in Cottage Grove, so the sergeant here
Good.
provides a report every month. So
Good.
We'll compile that information for you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it, so we get a baseline.
And that's exactly what we did. We just took our monthly data that we already had and
Yeah,
then just put
sure.
it together and gave you
Yeah.
a number like that.
Can you guys give me some insight into the training related to the SRO position that the officers receive?
Well, so literally, the replacement SRO just got done with 40 hours of training down in Iowa at a basic school resource officer class. In addition to that, there's annual conference that we send our officers to for updated training. And it's actually, there's a second one that you attend. Was it the one that you had? Thank you. Active threat, which that encompasses not just school district, but as a general principle. But a lot of the applications there, we can implement for the school districts and help them out to be prepared. And again, we always say it's, everybody envisions that it's always going to be a shooter or something of that nature. But an active threat could be truly an upset parent related to a custodial issue.
Yeah.
And having to be able to calm that situation down in an efficient and effective manner so that it doesn't turn into something bigger, worse. So,
Yeah, obviously we need training, we need to be prepared for those instances. But what I'm just as concerned about is those 99% of contacts, which are 90% student initiated, that the officer knows how to deal with an adolescent in often a difficult or emotional or whatever situation, and knows how to properly respond to that. And I want to make sure that the training is appropriate to that.
School safety puts out a really good training. It's the adolescent brain.
Uh-huh,
I forgot how many hours that training was, but I learned a lot.
uh-huh.
It is a lot different than but I did find like the trainings that I did go to, the National Association of School Resource Officers puts on that basic SRO class.
Great
because
training.
It is a different way of policing. It's 180 from being out on the street. And that was the hardest part to understand and get at first, as a first year SRO. But then as the years go by and you continue to go through those trainings, you learn it's a different way of policing in the schools. We're trying to be preventative and informative and help the kids and not punitive. Not out there hammering kids. It's more teaching them like, hey, we can't do this and this is why. And then they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So the trainings are the Office of School Safety, the National Association of School Resource Officers. They put on a lot of good trainings to help a street cop become a good school cop.
And that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and that is just, and Alako, yes, did also all of that. But that is also just unique to the SRO. The SRO then is a part of, I'm assuming it's the case in Cottage Grove, the regular sort of training that the village or the city puts on, to include any implicit bias training, to include critical incident training and response training. So it's sort of, they get, that wonderful piece, but they always also get this growing piece that any other officer on the street gets as well.
I really appreciate that you acknowledge that it's difficult, that process to, it's good.
and that's why we make sure that they do get that training.
Right.
So that they are prepared
Right.
and able to work in that environment. Because again,
That's
you don't
good.
want to set anybody up for failure.
Right.
And truly, if the SRO fails, that's a failure to the students.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first priority.
And then there's just one other thing, which is that I want to remind everybody, this is Fund 80.
Correct.
Which means that it's a community program, which means it can't be exclusive to the schools. We do have to think about how we make this resource, how these resources are available to, in this case, it would be any kid in our district, regardless of whether or not they're in the schools, and how we can be part of that. Because it is required that we do that by the way we fund this program. And I don't see anything in the MOU, and I don't know how that works, but I just want to bring that up because we do have to think about it and keep it in our heads that we need to be able to do that.
Peter, you stumped me on that the last time. I vowed never to be stumped again. Let me tell you, I've got a list of all the activity, because I didn't know. I mean, I didn't, you educated me on something, and so that was something which I had Luke here, because Luke would have been like, Chief, we do this, we do this, we do this. And then, I think a lot of the work we do is with our Parks and Rec, right? A lot of the engagement that we do with the Monona Parks and Rec, but also, as I mentioned earlier, we do have and you have a private school as well, don't you? Did I? No, no. I live in the village. I should have known that. Yeah, you do. Is obviously we have Immaculate Heart, and then we have One City, right? And so Luke actually spends a lot of his, not a lot, you consume a lot of his time, but a good chunk of his time providing similar resources, not on the same level and scale, but similar resources to those those schools as well. To include, they're now on SRG, right? The I Love You Guys Foundation, they now are mirroring a lot of the same things that the district is doing because it makes sense, right? We're gonna have the same officers responding or providing a resource. Let's talk the same lingo.
All right, then I don't have to ask that question again.
Well, just keep me in check, okay?
That's what we're here for.
I have a couple of questions and a comment. So one, a comment, and I want to echo what Eric said. When I came on the board, it was at the beginning of our last MOU cycle, as you'll remember, and I was quite skeptical of SRO, particularly at the elementary school, right? And I understand its utility at secondary in a different way. It feels like a different thing than at elementary school. And I will say, similar to Eric, I am now just impressed, but really grateful with how kind of open and collaborative you've been around rethinking some of the pieces, right? The way that, folks orient and show up, that number is incredible. And so similar to Eric, it's like, yeah, I get it. It makes sense to me and it's working. And so I just wanted to commend you for that because I think that's not an easy thing to do, right? To come in as a new chief and go, you know what? I'm going to take this feedback. I hear it. I see it. And then I'm going to try to incorporate some changes. So I wanted to really pause to acknowledge that. I think that's a really special thing in a leader. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Two questions I have. One is for you, Sergeant Jess. So you had referenced, it's a different job, right? It's the same topic area or whatever, same occupation, but different role. So what role, if any, will you be playing in supporting any new folks that come on board, right? Because I feel like you have a lot of lessons learned, right? And things that you can share and mentoring that you can do. And I recognize that you probably have an entire list of other duties now, but I'm just kind of curious what that onboarding process will look like for the new folks.
Before she answers that, she'll be integral. in that part.
Did you know that, Jess?
Yes.
I
I
can
wouldn't want it any
reassure
other
that.
way. Yeah.
She will.
I will put in my 2 cents for sure.
Good.
And help him out. He has come to me with questions already. He's come to the school on his own time just to take a walk in my shoes of what I do during the day, and I will be there to help him. I told them, I'm not leaving. I'll still stop in and say hi. But yeah, I will definitely help him and mentor him come into that role.
And again, she's still going to be a resource for the students and for the faculty and for you, even in this new role.
Yeah.
Now, she might not be your first call,
Yeah.
but she is still going to be a resource. And that's the one thing, we're never going to lose that aspect of it.
Second question I have is, I think something that is lovely and unique about our community, right, is that you both represent different municipalities that essentially have a shared service with us. And so I'm curious from your perspective, how does the collaboration work? How does it feel thinking about obviously in Monona, you have your own perspectives, ideas, Cottage Grove, right? You have your own perspectives and ideas. Our communities have some similarities, but certainly there's a Venn diagram there. So I'm just kind of curious how you both work together and how you come together to ensure that the staff that you're putting in our buildings are kind of in lockstep.
Communication, truly, it's just having, he's called me, I've called him, we discuss matters, the SROs are working in sync, and truly with Officer Leak stepping in and out of that role, he's going to build that relationship with Luke at Monona. They know each other, but it's going to be in a different capacity now, and truly, it's not having a set of this is the way it has to be. You're right, both communities are unique to themselves. But that's also what makes this a great district and makes this truly a good marriage. And I have no problem talking with Chief, and he has no problem talking with me, and our officers talk with each other.
Good.
And it's not just at the SRO level. Again, we're doing it in training purposes also.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Anything else to add?
You covered it. I like the marriage portion.
A little bit of a forced marriage by us.
Okay.
No, it works out well. Mark said it right. We message, we text, we call, we consult one another, but our SROs do it probably way more than we do. And that includes after hours, right? You think we have a 24-hour job. These SROs, as you know, just like several of you, especially I'm looking at Dr. Olson here, gets calls at all times of the day, right? That's okay. That's why you need that special person in that job. And I think I'm very appreciative of the chief here and his role because we philosophically are aligned. That helps, right? Especially in terms of this unique role. And they get it done. I mean, I think the chief can say too, and I've heard plenty about your work, good things, that they make our job easier because they're out there doing great work. So, yeah. And I should say too that, Jess, maybe you can speak on this just a little bit, how the SROs meet within the county regularly.
Oh, yes. So every month, Dane County SROs, we meet and we talk about trends that are happening in our school and how, hey, I had this, how would your district handle this, or how did you handle this? So we all talk together. We all have a group email. We keep in constant contact with each other. So it's not just we're in our own little island. We constantly are communicating. We meet. Luke and I talk almost every day, several times a day, because we have to. We
Yeah.
work together. I mean, he's in a different department, but that's our
I mean, yeah, but you're like colleagues, right? You're basically coworkers.
Right, so I see him a lot more than anyone else, but it works out great. It's perfect.
If there aren't any other questions, I would entertain a motion for our MOU.
Approval of the MOU as presented. Don't have.
Second.
Second, right? Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Excited for another few years, and thank you all for the work that you do for our students and our staff.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Dr. Olson, congrats again.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving on to the 2024-2025 preliminary budget. Mr. Powell, you are up.
A couple things. First of all, as this is my last meeting, I'd like to thank the Monona Grove School District for the opportunity to work here. Personal circumstances have led me to make a change. I'd like to acknowledge the administrative staff who as business managers, you judge administrative staff by how much they bother you and call you. And so I'd say this one is awesome. Second of all, acknowledge Joe for his award, and he's one of the best ADs I've ever worked with. And hope he continues that trend. We've had some interesting conversations. And finally, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Olson. Dan and I have known each other a long time, and he is undoubtedly the best superintendent I've ever worked with. I think Monona Grove has been lucky to have him the last few years, and as Elizabeth said, hopefully you'll follow your passions, and hopefully it will be to get his handicap down to single digits.
I was going to make a golf reference too, so I'm glad you got it, Bob.
But, you know, you guys couldn't have picked a better guy. It's obvious by his award of last year of being superintendent of the year, and I don't think there's a better person that I've worked for in my many stops. So anyway, congratulations, Dan, on your retirement. So let's get on to the budget. Any questions? No. So as always, present the preliminary budget in a pretty high level look. In June, just, history, obviously, we had the approval of the referendum to exceed the revenue caps over the next few years on a recurring basis. Last year was 6 million. We're going with 1.6 this year. I've made some assumptions, also laid out the budget dates there, as you can see. My successor will follow the schedule as I provide that information to Kristen. But the assumptions currently in June, as we are early in the process, we're in the second year of the biennium budget. The revenue limit increase in forever, supposedly, is $325 per student. We're assuming a 40 student increase. The revenue limit is increased by 1.6 million. Open enrollment, we get an increase every year. Excuse me. We're projecting probably about 30 to 40 more students for open enrollment. The per pupil allocation has stayed the same. I did not project an increase in state aid, just for illustration purposes. Grants and the reimbursement on the special ed is the final number this year from DPI. As we go to the expense side, it's kind of a yearly thing as we look at increases in transportation of 3%, utilities of 5%, and open enrollment of 3%. Those will be updated as we know more as we get towards the annual meeting. And I will leave that information. I've provided this information to Kristen. Health and dental is kind of a placeholder as we go. The renewal will be January 1st. Excuse me. The staffing plan was reviewed by the board in both March and April, I believe, and then projected wages increases that are going to be approved as in the next few minutes, and projected settlements with staff. So as we project out, we have a balanced budget at this point. Obviously, between now and then, we'll get better information to solidify those numbers. But I would propose that the board approve the budget document as presented, and we'll address any questions. I just wanted to point out at one point, you can see that food service is unbalanced. At this point, we are waiting for updated information from the Fed about what the increases in the per pupil allocation will be, or a reimbursement rate, I guess. And we do have a significant fund balance that will cover any of the shortfall. And at some point, we will have to develop a plan to spend that down because DPI requires that. It's a federal regulation. And we do have some opportunity to spend that down because we do need to upgrade some of our equipment. Maggie can provide some information as we go forward, as she always does, kind of providing a year in and a year projection. I know Elizabeth loves that.
I do.
So I will make that a note for Kristen to have her do that, and we'll talk to Maggie about it as well. But that was the only one that was unbalanced, so I just wanted to point that out and provide the board with some information about that. But other than that, address any questions.
Questions? Yes, Philip.
Yeah, Mark, just the Fund 10 list, could you just elaborate a little bit from my knowledge on the transfers line item? Because I noticed that really besides salaries and benefits, transfers is the only other, potentially interesting line item from a percentage
That's
increase.
the transfer to special ed. So we have to cover, depending on what our revenue is for special ed, between the Fed and our special ed aid based on our prior year expenses, we have to cover that out of Fund 10. So it's based on increases in salaries and benefits and everything out, tuition and things like that. So it's kind of an in and out type of thing.
So it's driven, and it sounds like, by salaries and benefits similar to the regular salaries and benefits,
Correct.
which would explain
Correct.
why it's the other sort of semi-significant increase. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Actually, all but 200,000 of that transfer goes to special ed. Where's the other $200,000 go? Well, the special ed transfer is local source 6294.
Yeah, it's a typo.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm like, well,
Really?
yeah, it's a typo. It's
All
a
right.
typo.
Um,
You update as you go along and you don't always find it.
So, and just a reminder, I mean, almost exactly 2/3 of our special education, or Fund 27 revenue comes from our Fund 10, and the state funds a third of our special ed expenses. My question to you is, how do our special ed expenses compare to other districts around here? As a
Well,
percent of our total expenditures?
well, I don't know what our exact enrollment is as far as special ed as a percentage, but the average statewide is probably about 12% of our students. And it just depends on the needs of them, whether or not we have to send some out and Chris can talk about this, she's here, tuition-based, because we cannot provide
Right.
or we have one-on-one aids, which we can put through flow-through, or we can do increases in our revenue limit. Just depends on I don't know, I don't want to say, needs of the student, trying to be politically correct. So, yeah, I don't know as far as other districts, and obviously, bigger districts are gonna have a more allocation towards that on a number basis, on a percentage basis.
Yeah, I'm curious about the percent.
Yeah,
Really,
I don't
I'm
know.
sort of you can use it as a baseline as how we compare to
Yeah,
other districts.
I really don't
and,
know, I don't know.
And it's a very quantifiable number, and I'm curious about where that is.
Yeah. But we have seen an increase in tuition issues in the last couple of years, just because based on people moving into the district, that we've had to provide those services.
Right. Yeah, I understand. I'd just like to understand where we are. I mean, the estimate is, I forget how the group, that our districts like ours take $2,000 from every general ed student to fund special ed students. And, and the distribution across the state is very uneven about
Yeah.
that too.
And in the last couple of years, it has been creeping up a little bit as far as more funding has gone into the state formula and things like that, because this year, I think it's going to be the current year they adjusted. The final number is going to be a little under 33% reimbursement. It's been 31, 30, 29, 28 in the past. So they are starting to get it a little better. Next year is probably going to be projected to be a little over 33%. We'll just see what happens with it. Second year of the biennium, I don't know if they're going to try and put more money into it, but it's a some certain, not a some need, or whatever they call it. So,
And we're going to end.
some sufficient.
And we're some sufficient, right?
Yes.
And we're going to end up 23, 24 balanced with no change to our fund balance?
No, we had talked about that before because of some of the salary things, but so probably about, maybe $300,000 to $400,000. Yeah,
What's our fund balance right now as a percent?
15%. So,
Yes.
So you mentioned fund balance and having to spend out of it because still 15% is too high.
no, 15% is low. Usually the recommendation, and I think we have I don't know what policy.
Policy.
Yeah, the policy is to strive to over 15%, I think it is, Peter. 50 minimum. A lot of districts try to have a minimum of 20, just because depending on how big their budget is and where they are in their spending and revenue intake, a lot of districts have to short-term borrow. So the more fund balance you have, the less you have to short-term borrow, the less interest you have to pay, especially these days with the interest rates the way they are. We get more money on our balances, but we also have to pay more. The district participates in a short-term borrow consortium where they get a group of districts together to kind of buy down the rate. And so it helps with us with that. But, it's still a significant increase in where we were in the last few years. As you know, with your own personal bank accounts, you're getting a little better increase in, and then mortgage rates and everything. So everything's kind of tied together, and the trends and prime rate and all that stuff, so.
Yes, Susan.
So Mark, what's your thought about, just so we kind of know what your thoughts are about the transition out and the transition in terms of, so if we approve the preliminary budget tonight, how does that move forward with a new business director?
Well, I mean, they have a basis to go on, and I'll provide that information to them. And then it's basically just tweaking things going forward. As I said, I just projected a flat aid and not doing any kind of, taxing projection or other, because it's too early. So they'll get that information for the annual meeting, because it's July 1 when that comes through. And then they just review staffing, and, that's the biggest part of our budget. So they'll review staffing and, excuse me, and where we are. But it should all be pretty set going forward. There shouldn't be a lot of changes for the annual meeting, unless there's something I'm missing and they find it. But, yeah, it should be pretty close, other than just, adjusting the levy and the aid.
I move approval of the 2024-2025 preliminary budget as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Before we move to the next item, I do want to say thank you to you, Mark, for your service to the district. I feel like you came in at a really important time, because we were, like, our previous business person had been here for a while, had left. We were doing a lot of things on the CNI side in terms of, new curriculum and those pieces. And I think it's hard to do both things. It's hard to keep the operations part of the house humming and running and stable while you're doing new CNI stuff, right? I mean, that's just like the balance of how things go. And so I feel like you did an excellent job being able to do that, right? Like, never doubted anything that came, right? The budgets were always great. I love your memos. So, and everything I think was working and humming in a way that was really important to us. And so for that, I want to say thank you for that. And for kind of always being here, being stable, being able to make sure our budgets are aligned, and doing the work that makes our school district run and hum. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item, 2024-2025 revised open enrollment, nope, never mind, skipped one. 2024-2025 lease agreement with American Capital Financial Services.
Yeah, we don't have the final documents, so I didn't want to give, half the information to the board. So I'll work with Kristen and Chad to bring it back in the next board
Okay,
meeting.
so we'll just table this to the
Yeah,
next?
yeah.
Okay, great. And I have to motion to table, right? We just agreed to
Correct.
table? Okay, great. Well, I was actually right. I was prescient. 2024-2025 revised open enrollment recommendation.
Okay, so statutorily, the board has to approve open enrollment seats every January. As you know, that's pretty early to make, enrollment projections. And so by DPI rules, you have to wait and get through the whole process. Open enrollment closed at the end of April. May is when we then offered seats to the that were approved. After you get through that process, then the board can go back and look at if any adjustments are made in the enrollment projections, and you can open more seats if it is now determined that there is space. And so you might recall that one of the major policy changes this past year was to no longer have automatic acceptance of siblings, but only a preference. And so as we looked at this, we wanted to look really close at our enrollment projections and find out, are there some additional seats we could open up, particularly at those grade levels where we had siblings applied. So this recommendation tonight does provide seats so that every application received where they have a sibling in the school, it would allow them to be admitted for next year. And so really pleased with that. We've worked closely with the principals. And some of those class sizes that were right on the edge about where we want to be, but we really believe 1 or 2 students is not going to, make a difference. And it does allow us to have those siblings. There are also a couple grade levels where the recommendation goes beyond the number of siblings, just because the projections we have now are a little bit lower than we thought they were going to be in January. And we're more confident in those numbers. To the budget you just approved, these numbers are in there, and without we never take open enrollment if it's going to require us to add staff. So if the staff has the capacity to take the students, it is more revenue for the district, and the big thing we've talked about these last couple of years is being real thoughtful about, well, we might have space right now, but projecting when the kids get to middle school, high school, and we don't have a bottleneck there. So we feel confident in presenting these additional seats tonight to the board.
Yes, Peter.
And we usually do this in August.
No, June is the earliest you can do it. To be honest, we did it in May a couple times, and we kind of probably bent the rules a little bit. DPI wants us to wait till June. But, because for the families to make plans, to get a notice from us in August, oh, now we have a space for you, is kind of late. Yeah.
Eric.
I don't care what DPI says. We need to run our district, so I can care less what they say, but, I'm serious.
I know. That's why it's funny.
Whatever.
Can I say that when they want reports and things like that?
I can say it.
Tell them your board member said.
Talk to MPS.
Question of clarification. So where we previously in January approved 45, we're adding 37, so the total is now 82?
Correct.
Okay. So that answers my question. I was just wondering about the kindergarten, but because we didn't need to add any additional seats for that because we already have 7 approved and there were 5 sibling apps, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that was my question.
I move approval of the 2024-2025 revised open enrollment recommendations as presented.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? I just want to make one comment before we move to vote, which is, as you know, I was very vocal opponent of removing the sibling guarantee for all the reasons with which we've discussed through multiple meetings that we don't have to rehash. They're all on YouTube. But I do want to say thank you and appreciation, I think, for you, Dan, and your administrative team, that we're able to be nimble and flexible and go, okay, so we made our projections. Now we can relook at the numbers, look at real information that we have, the real apps that we've got, and see if it's possible to make it work for siblings. I think it just makes a huge difference for families. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I know it's no small task. And with that being said, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, 2024-2025 substitute pay rates.
Okay, so annually we'll come to the board and, and update these. As you recall, previously, your board approved changing our substitute services with EduStaff. And so they have a few additional categories that we didn't have, that they will be looking to provide substitutes for us. Reed Foster worked really closely with EduStaff, as well as looked at our Dane County comparables with this, and we are recommending increases in the majority of the areas. So if there are any specific questions about any of those and the rationale for the increase, Reed can help answer those questions as well.
Great, thank you. Any questions, anyone?
Yes.
Yes, Janice. Go
I'm
for it.
I'm looking at sick leave, and it says building substitute, so we're talking about like people who work for our district? No.
So thank you for asking that question. I actually meant to. That is something new. So we've had building substitutes for the last few years, and they have been paid like all other substitutes, their daily rate, but they have not had benefits. They are eligible for health insurance, through ACA, we have to, but they have never had leave time. Sick leave or personal days or anything like that. And most of the time, because what our initial thought was and experience was that those folks were looking at doing this on a short-term basis as a substitute until they could secure, a permanent job. But we have had some excellent building subs that would like, this is where they want to stay and in those positions. And so we felt in order, first of all, to help keep some of that staff, offering these benefits would be helpful. We also thought it was the right thing to do. So again, the principals work closely with Reed to bring this forward as a recommendation. So thank you for asking that. That is an additional benefit we don't currently have, the leave time.
So
So
our
the
current-
building subs, actually, I didn't answer your question. They are employees of the school district. They are not through EduStaff.
Okay. And this is for EduStaff?
So it's both.
Both.
Yeah, so the chart at the top is the EduStaff rates.
Ah.
Yeah, and then the bottom is the additional, the
For building
new
subs.
leave benefit that we're requesting for our building substitutes. Yeah.
Any other questions? Can I get, oh, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Anybody thinks $235 a day is high, it's not. It's about $33,000 a year, so it's not that high.
Yes. Thank you, Eric, for that.
So now that I understand this, I have to say, I didn't realize that our building subs didn't have sick leave or personal leave, and I think this is a really great thing for them to have because I know how valuable they are. So I'm really happy that this is in there.
I move approval, oh, do we already do that?
Nope, we haven't.
I move
It's you,
approval
Rochelle.
of the 2024, 2025 substitute pay rate as presented.
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, so next up, the 2024-2025 revised extracurricular / additive schedule.
Okay, so you have the recommendation and rationale for a number of new positions. This is something that every time we have new clubs or activities that have been established, we'll bring forward. So it's not always necessarily a certain time of the year, sometimes it's even mid-year, but you have a number of recommendations. I appreciate the work that Joe Snyder has put into this and to provide those rationale. And just for the record, as mentioned, I think earlier, personnel is looking at some additional ones. I would expect to bring back some additional recommendations as well, but these are the ones we're asking for approval this evening.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Yes, Peter.
Let's see, in the recommendations, there's a discussion of the co-curricular base, moving it to 45,000.
Yeah, so that is not part of the recommendation this evening because that is something the Personnel Committee is going to talk about.
Gotcha.
Yep, we have a limited number of resources there. Yeah.
The co-curricular additives are calculated as percentage of a base salary, and right now that base salary is $40,000. In case you're wondering how we get to the numbers.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? Yes, Eric.
Strength and conditioning coach, Joe, why is that 18%? Why is it so high, 7,200, just curious?
3 seasons. So essentially, it's a full year position that they have, and they're also overseeing pretty much every athlete that we have in our programs. Big safety aspect to it that they need to be certified in as well. And when you look at kind of trends around our Badger Conference, that's kind of the rate now.
Okay, so it's just because they're seeing, there's a lot of students that they're responsible.
In a long season.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move approval of the 2024, 2025 revised extracurricular additive schedule as presented.
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? Yeah, great. I would.
Because I feel like the 2 additives that we discussed had I, as a person on Personnel Committee, known that we were talking about additives, I would have advocated for us to discuss those additives so that could be included tonight. But we didn't know that. So I really, I feel like they should have made this list, and we should have had that discussion.
So Janice, you're talking about additives that are not on this list, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And my understanding, and Philip, that you'll be talking about some of those additives at personnel on Monday, correct?
Yep, and then the intention is to bring a recommendation for the next board meeting in July.
Thank you, Janice.
So would you clarify that? So
Yes.
when you meet on Monday, here's what we have in front of us today. What you're going to talk about on Monday is not in front of us right now.
Correct.
And that discussion is going to include what additives? Do we know? I mean, that's public
Yeah,
information.
it's, well, you should say it.
Yeah, I believe it was two
I'll-
additional GSA. I don't remember if the right term
Coordinators, I
is
think.
coordinator or director. And then a potential increase to the additive for the, is it the assistant
Director.
orchestra director? Yep.
And it's a question whether it was a second orchestra director or an increase to assistant, whatever, but there was some stuff to work.
Thank you. I will do a roll call vote per Janice's request. Susan? We're voting.
Oh, sorry.
Rochelle?
You had been doing the whole group before, and so.
Yeah,
just so we all-
sorry,
just for a
Janice,
second
Janice
when you
requested a
called
roll
my
call.
name.
Janice requested a roll call for this one. Susan? Rochelle?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Janice? Elizabeth, aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. All right. 2024-2025 coordinator contracts.
Okay, so we have 5 coordinator contracts for review tonight. Those are one-year contracts, and it does require board action annually to renew those contracts. They do not automatically renew like teacher contracts do.
I move approval of the 2024-2025 coordinator contracts as presented. Coordinator contracts.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, next up, the 2024 to 2026 administrator contract. Yes,
I move
Susan?
approval of the 2024-2026 administrator contract as presented.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Sorry, that one really threw you off, Susan. I apologize for that. All right. 2024-2025 support staff compensation.
Like a little summary of it? Be
Sure.
glad to. Okay, so Personnel
Sorry,
Committee.
we're rolling too fast for you, Dan.
No, not a problem. So you have the updated plan, and so this would be all of our non-represented support staff. The represented staff, of course, will be engaging or are engaging in collective bargaining. Especially the folks that are 12 months, we would like to have this impacted for the July 1 rollover. And so the average wages for all groups is 4.12%. So what I'm asking for approval on is the wage scales. The individual names are there for illustrative purposes.
Can I get a motion, please?
Move approval of the 2024-2025 support staff compensation plan is presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Next up, 2024-2025 administrator compensation.
And the document is self-explanatory. It's for the same thing, overall average of 4.12% for the administrators.
I move approval of the 2024-2025 administrator compensation is presented.
I'll second.
Further discussion, Peter?
I just want to note that 4.12 is the DBI CPI for contracts beginning in July.
Any other discussion? Great, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, 2024-2025 Dane County Schools Consortium Director Compensation.
Again, we're the fiscal agent for the consortium. There are 16 school districts in Dane County that are part of this. It's the School to Career Program. And so since we're the fiscal agent, it runs through our payroll. And so we do have an executive board that actually, and this is paid for by other schools, not us, but because technically Josh is an employee of the school district, it requires this board's approval as well.
Thank you, Dan. Can I get a motion, please? Yes, Susan?
I move approval of 2024-2025 Dane County School Consortium Director compensation as presented.
I second that.
Any further discussion? Yes, Eric.
Just a clarification, I think, I don't know if I ask this all the time, but that because it's part of other schools, they are paying into this as well, but they're just paying us, right?
Exactly, yep.
Thank you, Eric. Other questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Yes,
I
Susan?
would just like to add again that we've had great success with this individual in this position. And I just want to say once again, thank you to that individual and to the family supports that individual and supports us in many ways for the work that's being done. We see really a great, significant success with that programming.
Susan? I think we voted already, so ayes have it, motion carries. All right, revised student services and equity coordinator job description.
Okay, so this position, we've had, for quite some time, but in the past few years, we have added the duties to this position to also be the MG21 administrator. And now as we transition with them having their own full-time administrator, we thought it was appropriate to look at the job description, make some revisions. And so some of these are some additional duties that we will add on. Others are clarifications about the specific role. And so all certified positions, descriptions must be approved by the board, not only by policy, but by statute. So glad to answer any questions about any of the proposed revisions.
Yes, Eric?
Is the change from administrator license, Dan, of a preferred required going to affect is this for someone we already have?
It is, and I should probably be clear, the position is currently held by Shelby Steele. Yeah.
So looking ahead, if we potentially have to hire someone, do you envision that might decrease the amount of applications we would get for this position?
I would say if the position becomes vacant, that would definitely be a discussion that we would have of do we leave as is, or might we want to make a revision at that time, for sure.
Thank you, Eric. Other questions? Can I get a motion, please?
I move approval of revised student service and equity coordinator job description as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I just have one comment, and this is around the review curricular resources in conjunction with CNI. I really appreciate that add. I think that's really important, especially kind of in light of some of the pieces that have been happening. So just wanted to note that. Yes, Susan?
Dan, I just wanted to confirm again that Shelby, you guys worked on this together, right? And just,
Yeah, so primarily Krista Foster, she supervises the position, and so Krista did the bulk of the work, but we did work on it together. Chris and Lisa Hype as well. We really worked together close. And Shelby has seen this, yes.
and again, she's got a great asset to the community and to the district. And I just wanted to make sure everybody was collaborative and cohesive. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Oh, that's all right, I got you. Ayes have it, motion carries. Last action item is policy revision, second reading.
I move approval of the policy revisions as presented.
Any further discussion? Yes.
Bring forward that thing about Chromebooks and how we have policies that aren't reflecting reality. So if at some point we could have a discussion about that, that would be great.
Yeah, that sounds good, and I wonder about for policy committee.
What was the exact question?
It's about the technology policy. We had a pretty robust conversation last board meeting about the policy versus, like, in theory versus how that policy lives and breathes in real life.
And how it actually functions in school.
So I think what Janice is requesting is to have a discussion at policy committee around that.
Maybe we invite some of the technology people to tell us how things are going.
Yeah.
That's more what I was thinking
Oh,
you were
great.
getting at, yeah.
Oh, I like that idea too.
That
So
actually.
here, not through policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually, I was just going to say, that sounds like a bigger thing than just policy committee. Because we had reviewed the policy, but then what happens is you have the administrative guidance piece that comes in after that. And then sometimes components from the teacher handbook. And I think it would be very helpful
Yeah.
to hear from administration about how those pieces integrate.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Because policy may just say, hey, the speed limit's 70 miles per hour, but then when you go through a school district, it goes down to 20. You know, I mean, just the pieces and how do all those pieces come together, I think would be very helpful.
If we could invite the people who are dealing with the broken Chromebooks, like that, and all the things, that
Yeah.
would be awesome.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a great suggestion, Jen. Does our technology staff work all year round? Are they on?
Yes.
Okay. Let's think about, well, we can think about timing for that from the perspective of like what staff and who, given the fact that it's, right? And so some of our staff are working and many are not. So, but I appreciate that. Thanks. Anything else? Great. All those in favor? Aye.
Nay. For the we're talking about policies.
Policy revision, second reading.
Yeah, I just have a problem with the ones I have always had with 1421, 3121.
Yeah.
Appreciate they're looking at those in the revisions, but nothing really looks like it changed, so nay.
So opposed, nay, one nay. Great, ayes have it, motion carries. All right, discussion items, policy revisions, first reading.
Okay, we have one, school resource officer program. So again, this is a policy that Neola had available as a template, and we didn't adopt it initially. I don't recall when it was available, but it didn't necessarily align real well with our MOU in the past. And so we did actually have legal counsel look at it, and to be clear, which of these things are already in our MOU. The MOU approved earlier tonight added a few things so that the two of them are aligned. Our policy committee has had a chance to review this. As I mentioned, our chiefs have looked at it. They have no problem with, they feel that they can meet these requirements. Of course, they have to. They're in the MOUs just to prove, but they were very supportive of this as well. So I think, you know, it's nice to have it in policy because it's easy access. Everyone can see what the goal of the program is instead of having to dig out the MOU, which is not as accessible.
Yes, Peter.
Did the policy committee consider the National Association of School Resource Officers documentation about best practices for SROs in shaping this policy at all? There is a document out there from the National Association of Resource Officers.
So I don't know if it helps to know this, but we've been working on this policy for, would you say a year?
It's been up for review off and on for a long time,
significant
yes.
period of time. So again, I don't have a vivid recollection of looking at that particular piece of the document, but when this first came up, each of us, and I think Elizabeth may even been chairing the committee then, I looked up every statute I could find about that related to anything about SROs or court cases, or I looked up, and I know other policy members were looking up, because often when it's new, one of the questions you have is, where did it come from and how did you resource this? And I looked up everything WSB had about resource officers. And I looked up for any other Wisconsin model policies that other districts had. And we actually used those as resources as we were reviewing this. And this is kind of the piece that mostly with the Neola template, we had a level of comfort with this. And generally, if there are any recommendations for change or recommendations for review, it would be helpful to have anything that specifically you might think we could do better in writing.
Well, yeah, there are two areas that one is training. The policy doesn't acknowledge training, and the best practices that I can find both from DPI and from the National Association recommend that there be training standards, which I think are important. And then the second thing is that I also think is important that I see in these standards is administrative oversight that that the role for evaluation of the SRO of the administration for the SRO program that be stated in the policy well, actually, not policy. I don't know where it belongs. It belongs in the policy of the MOU, but I generally think that the policy should align with the MOU. And the policy should give us guidance about how to write the MOU, essentially.
So again, remembering it's policy and not administrative, so there'll be administrative guidance that's more specific under this, but the building principal shall serve as the designated liaisons between the district and law enforcement agencies and shall oversee the SRO program. So that would be the individual participating in that program as well. So would that address your issue with oversight?
I'm not sure because, I mean, the policies of the administration role in SRO evaluation. I'm sorry, not our policy, the best practices say that we should establish that the administration has a role in the evaluation of the SRO program. And the SRO officer, actually, not the SRO program, although it could be a little of both, I guess. And I just want to make sure that we follow the best practices for this, that's all. And I just see documentation, and I can make some
That would be great. If you could make those in writing, we can
Sure.
hold a policy meeting before the July meeting when we would have the second read, and we can have that discussion and bring that forward to the board. That would be great. If you would specifically, again, the need we have under policy is to have that in writing from you. That would be super.
Yes.
Point of clarification, I appreciate that, Susan. I would say that if you do choose to make any modifications, you do need legal counsel to review to make sure it is aligned with the MOU. And so I don't think you're going to get it done by the July meeting. And I don't think there's any rush to this.
There's no rush, I'm not.
The MOU is their guidance as it is. This is more a supplement to that. And
3 years
in
before
fact,
we
it might
write
be
another
good for your new administration to be part of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification.
So maybe, Dan, is one of the things you're suggesting is that maybe we approve this, consider approving this in July as written, with the ability then to make any additions. And again, it would have to be a comfort
I'll
level.
why don't you, I mean, I'll send you some things, you can consider the additions,
Okay.
and whether or not it's appropriate to move forward depends on what you think of the
Or
additions and where
we
you
might-
are.
we
And
might-
we just signed a 3-year MOU, so there's no rush.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think you could go either way. You could go ahead and approve this as is and then look at making a revision to it right away.
That's what I'm thinking.
Or you could table the whole.
Well, we don't have a decision to make there. I'd rather we get it right the first time.
I agree with Peter. So I think, Peter, if you can send your written recommendations, I actually have some modifications too that I'll send, which may or may not be similar to Peter's. And then I agree. My preference would be if you're going to modify this, that let's go ahead and run it through the process and pull it out for approval for second reading. Because there is no rush. We didn't have one the last cycle. And so then we can just approve it as a fresh new policy.
So
feels
is your
cleaner.
thought that if we could have those, within the next 2 weeks, then we'd have time to meet, to schedule a meeting?
I don't think that you should rush it, Susan, because I think per Dan's thought, because it's connected with the MOU, you're going to have legal counsel review it. And with the transition out of superintendents, I think there's probably going to be some delay between when Tanya can get that stuff in front of legal too. So I think even if we're thinking like fall, I think is okay.
To actually approve the policy, pushing.
Yeah, to have the updated policy kind of back at us. Fall feels reasonable to me.
Again, would you clarify for me, is your thought that we would try and approve a general policy like this?
No, I would
and
like for you to wait on this one so that we can get it in a good, right place. Because I don't think we should approve a policy if we can approve upon it, especially because it doesn't already exist.
And I again, having approved the MOU, and we've already, again, Peter, we've already worked on this.
Not
for
approving
what,
it doesn't have any impact.
2 years.
Yeah.
So trying to get it right would be good.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Great, that sounds like a good
And
plan.
Would you also send us the reference that you talked about? Because I'll make sure that I've got a folder like this on this, so.
Great. Any other discussions about this policy? Sounds like a good plan. All right, future meeting dates. One thing I want to draw everyone's attention to is that due to some conflicts, we've got a change in the July meeting. We're going to be meeting on Tuesday, the 9th, instead of Wednesday, the 10th. So I know Tish sent out the meeting invite for that, but just to like remind everybody that we're meeting on Tuesday. Why are you looking at me? It was.
Is that again?
For July.
I had in my head that was a special meeting because it was on a special date, but it's not.
It is not, I mean, it's special just because we're special, Peter.
The one on Tuesday.
It's not any specialer.
It's not any extra special, no.
It's Tanya's first meeting, so it's actually
It's
kind of
Tanya's,
special.
it'll be Tanya's first meeting.
Well, they won't be
And,
extra special.
yeah, and our standard date didn't work, so we had to move it to the 9th, which we talked about. But I know when it came today, even I was like, Tuesday? And I was like, oh, wait, that's right, we talked about that last month. So I just wanted to alert everyone that is happening on a Tuesday, July 9th.
That's what I got down. On that Monday on the personnel meeting, is that
It's the
date wrong?
17th, not the 19th. Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well.
Oh, thank you. Good catch. Okay. There's nothing else for the good of the group. I believe we have some cake waiting for us, so if we could get a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned at 8:46. Thank you, everybody.
I'm really impressed.
Yeah, that was actually very
It took
efficient.
me hours to get through. This is 17 pages of agenda. I never dreamed.
Proud of me?
Yeah, and that
Finally, I
was
said, if I'm home
perfect. I
before
mean,
11.
spent the time we needed to in the SRO.
Don't even think about it.
I feel like I was put out a couple times.
High functioning board up top is black.
Days.
That's what you can't see.
Let's